Valiant heart, unwavering resolve. I'm shaking. My hands are on my knees, panting. Let the monsters come. Let them come forever. Let them climb the piled bodies of their dead. I don't care. That's the thing I do better than anyone. Not care. Let them come in their hundreds, and every one will die at my feet. I don't care about their homing rockets, their exotic matter slugs, their blades from another dimension. I don't care because I cannot be moved. I am the wall against which the darkness breaks. Malphur can turn his gun to fire and Shinobu can dance with lightning, but when the horrors run out of the dark, I am the one who does not move. I am a wall, and walls don't move, because walls don't care. When is the last time you've ever heard the Sentinel Titan described as a wall? Sentinel Titan is one of those classes that is one of the least used subclasses outside of high-end PvE activity purely as a bubble champion. I want the Sentinel to feel like something more than just a super supplier. I want them to feel like something that's more than I press one button and then everybody gets a bubble. I want the Sentinel to feel unique and interesting both in its neutral game as well as its super game. I want it to be fun to play in PvP. Something that doesn't just feel like a normal Titan that happens to get an overshield from time to time and can throw shields. For both the players that love the class and for the players like myself who hardly touch it. I want to give it a facelift so that it can apply itself to the new stasis style of subclass selection so that you can pick and choose between how you go about choosing the subclass so that it is interesting to your specific playstyle to fit the way that you want to play, as well as opening up some new opportunities to express yourself through the subclass. I also want to rework some of the Sentinel specific exotic armor as well as suggest an idea of a returning exotic from Destiny 1. Let's become the wall. Sentinel for me has always been in an interesting spot. I've always wanted Sentinel to be something so special as it's the idea of a tank, something that doesn't really get expressed in Destiny, and Sentinel I feel like has really limp-wristed how it's handled it. So, like I mentioned, we're going to rework it. We're going to break up some of its key perks and passives into aspects and fragments. If you're a fan of the channel, you know that typically what we do is we start from the top and work our way to the bottom. We start with the grenades, the lifts, the barricades, the melees, and then we go down to the fragments and the aspects. I want to do it the other way around. I want to start with the fragments and the aspects and then work our way back to the stuff that we already know is pretty much going to stay mostly untouched. If you enjoy this type of content and you would love to see more of it, we have a whole playlist of this type of thing on the channel, so of course be sure to subscribe as it really does help us out. Leave a like and comment down below if you have an idea for your own ideas for subclass reworks. Let's start with the fragments. Some of these fragments you will notice will be very similar to some of the passives that already exist within the Sentinel, and that's intentional. I want the Sentinel for the players who play the class on the regular to feel somewhat similar but maybe a bit more interesting coming into this new system. So I don't want to remove anything from the class, I want to add to it, but for the most part everything should stay intact. The first fragment we have is called Rally Force. Melee kills trigger health regeneration for you and nearby allies. You'll notice this is very similar from top trees. Next up, we have Bulwark. Melee hits while you have an overshield have an increased damage and grant melee energy. Again, something very similar to the stuff that we've seen on the top, as I was talking about. This is a very clear example. It's something that you've already seen, so if you want to continue to play this way, you absolutely can. Here's where we start to get a little bit interesting. Resupply. Placing a barricade grants you and nearby allies grenade and melee energy. You may notice that this is from Middle Tree Sentinel Titan's Resupply perk, whereas before it would trigger this regen of abilities whenever you would detonate a void detonator. I want to make this a little bit more regular, something a little easier for the Sentinel to get access to in order to make them a main supplier of support. Keep the support idea, the support paradigm in mind as we're going through this. That and providing overshields are the two things that I really wanted to make sure don't escape the Sentinel as we're reworking it. Next fragment on our list is called In the Trenches. Charged melee kills have a chance to drop an Orb of Power. You may notice that this is something similar from Bottom Tree Sentinel, where if you are close to a target, you may get some super energy if you are surrounded. The reason why I'm specifically reworking it to drop Orbs of Power is when Sentinel was originally designed, Charged with Light did not exist. Now that we have Charged with Light and Guardians have regular access to it, I want to make sure that Sentinels in particular have a very good way of supplying Charged with Light builds to the team and to themselves. So, slightly reworking how we do in the trenches as opposed to giving it just straight super energy, giving you a charge of light by giving you an orb of power, as well as some other stuff we're going to play into it, will make it feel more special. Next up, we have War Machine. Dramatically increase reload speed to you and allies who have one of your overshields. Overshields, like I mentioned, will become more regular in this new system. So this is one of those things that will absolutely help out that overshield heavy build. Our next fragment is called Gift of Light. Picking up an orb of power refreshes any active overshields. Now, when we talk overshields, I want to make sure that we're clear that we are discussing any overshields from any type of exotic that you may get. In particular, you're seeing me use the Icefall Mantles with the Sweet Business in the background, which, side note, a lot of fun if you want to give that a shot in sixes. If we can make overshields something that is more supported within Sentinel specifically, we'll see overshields as an idea, as a build from exotics and from other things that we can get in general, come into the game with more force. In particular, a lot of people were disappointed with how the Icefall Mantles turned out. They wished that it would be just a little bit better. They felt the trade-off for the Barricade and the lack of speed really hurt the exotic. Well, with some of these changes, as you'll notice, some of the exotic armors that you can get overshields from, including things like the One-Eyed Mask, MK44 Standicides, and yes, Icefall Mantles, will allow you to get more benefit from those and get further synergy into them. Our next fragment is called Unbreaking. When your overshields break, you gain Barricade energy. This allows you to have a good back and forth for how you are able to maintain protection for yourself and for your team. How much energy, you may ask yourself? I'm thinking roughly 15%, similar to how you would get energy back if you were to, say, have perpetuation on a Titan mark. Our last fragment is called The Line. Your barricades resist incoming damage. I'm thinking a very small percentage, maybe 10%. This would allow them to, in general, survive a little bit better whenever you are trying to hold down a spot. I know that barricades in particular in Trials of Osiris can be very, very dangerous, but I feel like having to slot specifically one fragment in order to make this happen will be pretty good. Obviously, some of the other fragments that we mentioned will play into this quite well as well. You can go for either a very high barricade synergy, overshield synergy, or maybe a mix and match of both. But none of these really make a whole lot of sense by themselves. So let's talk about the aspects, as those really define what makes the Sentinel the Sentinel. The first three aspects are going to be our super modifying aspects. Number one, we have Banner Shield. This is very similar to what we currently have. Guarding creates a defensive wall that boosts damage to allies who shoot through it, and here's a change, and grants them an overshield. This allows you to, in general, if you have an overshield heavy build, give them that benefit that allows them to stay active and powerful in the fight. In particular, one of the problems that the Banner Shield has right now is that it is just a strictly worse Ward of Dawn for DPS. It's good for general ad clear and general just holding your spot and movement, but in terms of actually dealing damage, which is what Destiny and PvE is primarily needing, the Banner Shield really is lacking. So if you can give your allies that overshield, which of course with the War Machine fragment allows them to reload their weapons faster, it might make up for the fact that you also aren't shooting through that barricade. Maybe we could even increase the amount of damage increase that this gives in order to help balance it out, but I think some people who are more experienced in the PvE space will be able to give me a much clearer idea of what they think this should be specifically balanced. Next up, we have Ward of Dawn. I'm not going to be touching Ward of Dawn because I feel like it is a good benchmark for how the supers in general should be balanced around. It has a very clear goal that it's set in mind in order to try to accomplish, and it does that job very, very well. Obviously, you'll be able to get more benefit from the Ward of Dawn with the stuff that we've mentioned earlier, with those overshields having some more benefits attached to them. But I think as a whole, it's not going to absolutely propel Ward of Dawn to be the best of the best. I think it would keep it strong, but with everything else that's balanced coming up around it, it'll keep it in line. Our last super aspect is Second Shield. The only thing we've changed from Second Shield, whereas before it allowed you to gain an additional shield throw, is I've allowed it to now gain an additional melee charge and shield throw. I think that the Sentinel Titan in particular, because it wants to have an endless supply of support to the team, giving it the ability to get more of its melee charges out and active and into the fight will allow it to be able to supply more support to the team. This would be a great way to both modify the super for both things like PvE as a general add clear tool with of course something like the Doomfang Pauldrons, but as well as making it just much more usable in something like PvP, where having neutral game utilities is far more important. Having a second melee charge is far more important than being able to throw a second shield whilst you're in super. The next three aspects are the neutral game focused aspects. These would allow you to slot more of the fragments into them than the super based aspects. The super based aspects would only allow you to slot one per time. The reason for this is that the super based aspects are by default in PvE much more powerful. So we want to make sure that Guardians who are choosing to go, let's say, double super aspects are slightly punished for not having at least one neutral game tool, as they're obviously going to have a much higher spike in power once they pop their super. It's a good trade-off in my opinion. The first neutral game aspect we have is called Turn the Tides. Hold melee to consume it and trigger its effects. This is all of its effects. Obviously we haven't talked about some of the melees yet, which we will, but if you're wondering what this would look like from a first-person perspective, I want you to picture taking your palm and sticking your fist into it, very similar to what you might see in this emote right here. This would allow you to get whatever benefit you want from your melee easier. All of the benefits that you will get won't trigger to the allies around you, it'll only trigger it for you. So, I know we haven't talked about the melees, but of course if you remember, Top Tree's melee, with the Ward of Dawn, has the barrier melee, which when you get a kill with the melee, it gives you an overshield to you and nearby allies. With the Turn the Tides aspect, this would only trigger for yourself if you decided to do it, the Turn the Tides ability. So it allows you to get it a little bit easier, but the trade-off is that it's not as powerful as it could be if you were to do it the normal way. Our next neutral game aspect is called Demolitionist. Void ability hits attach a detonator. Further damage detonates them, granting you and nearby allies a portion of health. Something that we've seen on Middle Tree. Obviously, you might notice that some of the text that was associated with this, such as getting your grenade and melee energy back, aren't listed on this aspect in particular, but rather have been broken up and into the fragments. Our last aspect is called Reinforce, and this is a complete and total overhaul of some of the other perks that we've seen. Reinforce reads, allies who pass through your barricade gain a temporary overshield. Now the way this overshield would work, first of all, for PvP, it's going to be a very small, a very light overshield, as obviously having the access to free overshields can be very annoying and very powerful. So I'm thinking maybe 20 health. Something that will require a Guardian to shoot maybe one more bullet at a target, so that you might be able to win gunfights a little bit more frequently, but not something that would be so frequent and so often that it's just annoying. Also, this would have a sort of lockout mechanic, so if you were to go through the barricade, essentially until the barricade's down again, if your overshield breaks, you can't get another one back. This would be an excellent tool for pushing into a space, as the Titan could come up, pop down a barricade, their allies could run through it, get a set amount of overshield, and then challenge whatever's on the other side. If we feel like this might be a little bit too strong, perhaps what we could make it do is when a friendly Guardian goes through a barricade, it also damages the barricade for, let's say, 100. A Titan barricade has 600 health in total, so 6 Guardians for a 6v6 match would allow you to get all of your Guardians through and then completely deplete the barricade. Next, I'm going to talk about some of the abilities. So, some of the things that aren't changing. The jumps. We're not going to touch the lifts. There's no reason to. They're exactly what they need to be. Secondly, the grenades. They're pretty strong, and for Sentinel in particular, I think they're pretty well defined for what the Sentinel's trying to do. Of course, the suppression grenade is one of the best grenades that exist in the game specifically for PvP, so there's no reason to give that any crazy benefit. Lastly, the thing that we're not touching is, of course, the barricades. Towering and Rally Barricade are excellent. Let's talk about the melees. A lot of the subclass, because of the way that Titans work, Titans are very melee focused, are going to be very much defined by what melee they choose in particular. Starting from the top, Defensive Strike. This is currently the old Top Tree Sentinel's melee. Melee kills grant a powerful overshield to you and nearby allies. As we talked about earlier with some of the other both overshield and melee triggering effects, This is something that can be very, very powerful if used correctly. Next up, we have Shield Bash. After sprinting, press melee to unleash a powerful shield bash that suppresses and disorients nearby enemies. I've slightly redesigned this so that it also does it to nearby enemies as opposed to just the thing that you hit. I believe it currently already does this, but this makes it a little bit more explicit, as well as if you wanted to use the turn the tide aspect, you could use this as a general suppression tool, albeit a little bit more difficult to land. Lastly, we have Tactical Strike. Melee hits place a void detonator and then promptly activate any detonators. What you can do with Tactical Strike and something like Turn the Tides or some of your other melee focused effect triggers is you can make it to where you can, let's say, throw a magnetic grenade on an enemy guardian in PvP and then use your Tactical Strike to detonate all of the detonators that you have set up. This would allow you to coordinate big groups of damages all at once. In things like PvE, this would allow you to annihilate large groups of adds or really focus down on one specific larger health target. You can get benefit from this from some of the other fragments that we've mentioned, as well as doing the Demolitionist aspect. There's a lot of different builds that you could come up with. In particular, while we're on the subject, if you have an idea for some of the builds that you could come up with this new system, I would love to hear it. Personally, I would love to go for a very defensive style of Titan. I would love to go for a defensive strike, maybe even completely ignore any super modifying aspects, go purely for the neutral game, go Turn the Tides, and then maybe do Reinforce, and then with the amount of fragments that I have available to me, do something like Rally Force, Bulwark, Gift of Light, Unbreaking, and the Line. A really overshield, very tank heavy, anti-ape, anti-shotgun sliding, defensive style of Titan. Something that I think is sorely missing from the game right now, which would really help out nullifying some of the overly aggressive plays that are happening. Sentinels could be the thing that put their hand on the top of the ape's head and say, no, you need to slow down and you need to play this fight more thoughtfully. I did of course promise that I would rework some of the exotics. I want to talk first, however, about an exotic that currently doesn't exist in Destiny 2, that did exist in Destiny 1, that would be really, really good right now for the health of the game. This is the no backup plans. Back in Destiny 1, this would allow you to get your overshield effect from your melee, essentially trigger your melee effect whenever you got a shotgun kill. Obviously, that would encourage some very shotgun-heavy play right now. Despite me loving shotguns, I don't think we need to encourage those plays anymore, as they're currently the most prevalent thing that exists in things like PvP. Rather, here's what I suggest in its stead. Kills while surrounded by enemies grant an overshield and super energy. This allows you to fill a brawler playstyle for your Sentinel. If you probably have noticed this if you're a bottom tree Sentinel main, this is some of the text that you've seen from your In the Trenches perk now moved into an exotic. So you can now have both your Orb of Light, an Overshield, and Super Energy, allowing you to go on long sprees of brawling. You can build into the ability to pick up those Orbs of Power, as previously that's something that you can only get from, say, like a super or double kills or something along those lines. Being able to get it just passively from your kit will allow you to build a very powerfully focused, charged with light build. Next up for reworks, Armamentarium. Armamentarium as an idea is very straightforward and very simple. The problem with it is that it does not get enough effect out of what it is trying to do. Currently, Armamentarium allows you to get a second grenade charge. The problem with it is that most Titans really don't need that second grenade charge, as they're generally able to get their energy back relatively quickly, and there are far better options for exotic armors for Titans. So, on top of what it already does, I also want to give it the effect that grenade kills charge a portion of grenade energy. Again, this is another thing that we've seen from the old bottom tree Sentinel Titans kit, now moved into an exotic, so if you want to focus on that in particular, you can go for that grenade heavy build. Lastly, I want to rework Eternal Warrior. Eternal Warrior is very ugly, and it really needs to be something effective if people are going to use it. And you think I'm joking about that, but a lot of Guardians won't use a particular set of armor because it doesn't look good. They gotta have drip, and they gotta have power. So if we can't make it look better, let's make it at least powerful. Currently, Eternal Warrior allows for Striker Titans to get a powerful overshield when they activate their super. Far too situational and not nearly effective enough for both PvE or PvP. Instead, I want Eternal Warrior to give you an overshield for all supers whenever you pop it. So if you're doing something like Sentinel Shield, you could pop this with your Eternal Warrior on and become an absolute tank, being very difficult to kill just because you can both block bullets as well as generally having more health. I hope you enjoyed this rework. I hope you liked some of these ideas. If you did, of course, let me know in the comment section, leave a like on the video, and if you're new to the channel, subscribe. We do these kinds of things, these rework style of game design ideas, every single Wednesday of every single week, only barring sickness or something catching on fire. So it really does help us out if you subscribe, as it allows us to start to get this out a little bit more regularly. Let me know if you have any thoughts on anything that I've discussed so far. If you've discovered something that's a little bit too powerful, let me know. If you've discovered something that's a little bit too weak, let me know. Anyway, hope you enjoyed. Bless your faces, and deuces.